For the med ball good mornings, all we're gonna be doing is hugging this bend ball nice and tight, just to create a little more tension on the upper back so we're not leaking any energy. Big toe, pinky toe, heel planted into the floor. Soft bend in the knees, but not too much. You're gonna start by bringing those hips back as if you're trying to touch your hips to the wall behind you. We're gonna go until we feel a really deep stretch in the hamstrings and glutes, and then push ourselves forward. This is hopefully going to be more of a hamstring dominant movement for you. To get that, we're gonna make sure that the knees stay a little bit locked out, but they're still soft at the end of the grand scheme of things. So here we have a single leg Roman chair extension. This is gonna be predominantly a bit more glutes. So I want you to make sure that you have your knee fully extended or your leg fully extended. One leg is gonna be slightly off of that pad. I'm going to be thinking about coming all the way down, just holding on through that right leg until I feel a really deep stretch going in the back of my leg. As I push up, I'm thinking about just extending through that one leg as I go through my movement back and forth. So for the Roger squat, this is gonna be quite similar to doing a regular barbell back squat. The luxury of this is making sure that we have the stability of the fixed machinery. Now, if we're gonna apply the plates up top, it's gonna be a little more length and bias, so we're gonna feel more of the load in the back end or the bottom of the movement. It's gonna be below us, it's gonna be a little more short in position, okay? So as we sit into position, we wanna position this pad where it feels most comfortable to us. For me, I'm just gonna have it on the top upper portion of my traps. Take out the lockout. I'm gonna position my feet underneath me. The more knee flexion we get, knees over toes, it's gonna be a little more quad. The more I shift back into my hips, the more I'm gonna get a little bit more shift into the glutes. But again, it's gonna be dependent on what you look like as you go through your squat. Coming all the way down, making sure we get an ample amount of depth each time, making sure that hip joint at least goes to where that knee would be. So for the pendulum hip press, the way we dictate one, where the seat is, plus where our feet are positioned is gonna dictate where we feel it the most. So if I'm a little bit lower on the platform, my feet is a little bit closer up, plus I'm making sure that my knees are falling forward, probably gonna feel a little more quads. If I'm a little bit up on the platform, okay, seat may be a little bit farther back, I don't get as much knee flexion, I might be getting a little bit more in the back of my legs, preferably on the glutes. But for right now, we're just gonna find a normal stance, okay? Find a position that's gonna work well for you. We're gonna unlatch. You can think about pressing into the sides of the machine, or you could be pulling into the machine depending on what feels best for you. Now for me, I'm just gonna pull into the machine. I'm going to slowly come back. Make sure the glutes don't come off the pad. I wanna think about pressing the entirety of my foot away from me as I go through that concentric phase of the movement. Chest flies, okay, when we set up in position, it's the same way as doing a pec deck or anything else. The only difference is the concavity of this bench allows us to not let those shoulders or back to come up too much. So make sure as we move through position, elbows stay slightly bent, but also fixed the entire time. Making sure that as I come towards the top of the movement, I'm thinking about squeezing my chest together, almost as if it's kissing. I am fully stretching out my chest, making sure, again, elbows stay slightly bent, but they stay fixed the entire time as I go through the movement. For the lying leg curls, we want to make sure that the hip never comes up off the pad and I'm pulling myself into position the entire time. So holding onto the handles, gripping them nice and tight to make sure the hips don't come up. I'm going to have my toes pointed outwards while I'm trying to externally rotate my knees apart. So assume making sure the hips stay externally rotated. I am coming all the way back down into full extension. Make sure this machine is set up where you could fully extend those legs as I have here. And then I'm just gonna think about bringing my heels towards my butt the entire time. If you wanna get a little bit more of a deep stretch, you could always put a pad underneath you as you go through. 1.5 hack squat is quite similar to doing a regular hack squat. The only difference here, again, we're stopping halfway up from coming up, coming back down and coming right back in. Again, creating more tension for the quads at the end of the movement where it's being felt the most within this movement. So make sure that those feet are as low on the platform as possible. Okay, if the heels come up a little bit, that is not the end of the world. Make sure we're nice and braced into the pad. Slowly coming down, making sure my knees fall over my toes, coming up halfway, coming back down, and coming right back up. For the lateral raises with the kneeling machine, okay, we're just setting ourselves up so we're nice and grounded into position. This is a pretty fixed piece of machinery, so we're only really going to be able to go one way, but we're gonna make sure our arms stay slightly extended the entire time. I wanna think about reaching away from my body, slowly coming down, controlling the movement, and coming up towards where my hands could be in line with my shoulders. To fix curls, we could do it 1 or 2 arms at a time. We want to make sure that this elbow stays in line with the shoulder the entire time. Almost think of it as a shelf. You don't want that shelf dropping. I want to make sure that I keep my arm nice and high the entire time. Think about bringing this D handle towards my head, stopping just shy of it, slowly coming back like I'm trying to tear that bicep apart. And as I come right back into it, I want to make sure I am just contracting through that bicep, making sure my wrist is not curling the entire time. Glute max kickback. We are going to set up the cable attachment to at hip or slightly above hip, whatever feels more comfortable to you. We want to make sure that as we move through this movement, that my leg or my knee can be above my hip joint. So as this is my starting position, I want to have this D handle underneath my foot. So at the bottom of my foot, I'm holding onto the rig for stability. As I come into position, I want to think about taking my heel and then punching the ground as I float backwards. Slowly coming back up, again, making sure that my knee can come above my hip. That's going to ensure that I can fully stretch out my glute. Again, stomping the ground, floating away. You'll know you're getting the right range of motion once you get a nice shortening contraction at the end of the position and then a nice stretch at the end of it. Front raises. Okay, we're gonna start ourselves in a staggered stance. So whatever arm we're working is gonna be opposite of the one that's in front. So if I'm on left, our right foot's gonna be in front here. We're gonna make sure that that arm starts behind our hip. As I come forward, I'm thinking about reaching towards my midline and then all the way up towards the sky, slowly coming down, keeping those elbows nice and extended, making sure I have tension on the front of the shoulder, and then going right back into it. Overhead tricep extension, we want this pulley to be landing a little bit above our hips. We're gonna come up into position. We can do it 1 of 2 ways. We can think about having the elbows naturally flare away, or we could have those elbows nice and tucked. Again, it's gonna be dependent on what is programmed for you, but I'm gonna do it as we are flaring away naturally with our elbows. We're gonna think about reaching towards that ceiling, slowly coming down, letting those elbows naturally flare away from each other. Our telltale sign we're at the range of motion that we want is when these knobs touch my traps, and then I come right back into position. Reverse Nordics, we could do it 1 of 2 ways. We could do it with a cable attachment, which I would prefer, but if you don't have that, you could also attach a band to a rig, and then you can do it the same exact way. But when we set up in position, we're gonna be on our knees. Okay, I would imagine you'd probably put a pad underneath if it does bother your knees. And then we wanna try to get the top of our feet towards that ground. And if we don't have the ability to do that, we could always go down into a kickstand position. But hands facing away as if I'm doing a face pull. As I come down, I wanna make sure that my body moves in unison with one another. I'm thinking about hugging that rope as I come all the way down. I want a nice deep stretch into my quads. As I come up, I want to think about rising from the dead. Notice how the entirety of my body moves with each other as I go back and forth. What I don't want to see is that hip or that body or torso move before anything else. Everything moves in unison, up and down. In cable laterals, we're going to be grabbing the handles opposite of one another. So my left hand is going to go to the right cable, my left is going to go to, or the right is going to go to the left. Now I'm going to lie down. The reason we do the lying with cable laterals is going to keep us a lot more stable relative to using just the regular cables or the dumbbells. I want you thinking about keeping the arms in front of your body and slightly to the side. So keep those arms nice and extended as we move through the position. Notice how I still keep it slightly extended as I come back down. I want you to try to get your thumbs to touch each other. And that is your key, that you're at the end of the range of motion on the back side. When we come up, I want you to make sure that your hands go towards shoulder height every single time.